Good evening and welcome to this very special webinar and very technical session that we have in partnership with Kotak Life Insurance, Metamorphosis 2020 and Insight on Managing Liabilities and Assets for Defined Benefit Plans. Defined benefits have been perplexing the investing in actuary community in insurance and pension space for a long time, not just in India but across the globe. Giving the defined benefits as promised to the beneficiaries is way more complex than simple mathematical formulae. And in this session, of course, we have very eminent panelists and our moderator, and this is going to be a very technical and an information session for our participants as well. We'll be doing a kind of a poll also, and we request everybody to be participating in that. The mantra for today's discussion is interesting. If you manage your liabilities, you become Atma Bharat in managing your assets too, whether it is at the corporate level, as a fund manager level, or even at the individual level. And I'm very pleased to introduce the panelists and the moderator for the session today. For panelists, we have Sudhakar Shanbhag, who's the Chief Investment Officer for Kotak Life Insurance. Sudhakar has been responsible for managing the company's investments within the overall framework laid down by the investment committee, board, and IRDA. And as part of Kotak Life Insurance leadership group, Sudhakar plays a very important role in developing and managing the investment structures, processes, practices to enable the customers to reap the benefits in accordance with their investment objective and the risk appetite as decided earlier by them while purchasing the plan. He's a qualified chartered accountant and a widely quoted knowledge leader in investment domain. And Sudhakar comes with close 2.5 decades of work experience, so very eminent panelist with us. We also have Mayur Ankulekar. He's a partner at Ankulekar and Company. It's basically an organization which is comprised of actuaries and consultants. Mayur is a consulting actuary based in Mumbai. He was originally trained as a chartered accountant and lawyer and has been a practitioner for over 25 years. For the past 2 years, he's been working on life and non-life insurance and employee benefits. He's worked with several multi-development projects and other organizations on actuarial and related policy matters in India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, Latin America. He's a fellow of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries UK and Institute of Actuaries of India. He currently serves on the Actuary Group on Sustainable Development and Microinsurance of Institute of Actuaries of India. He has published research in the field of microinsurance, social protection, and pensions, another very eminent speaker. And the session will be moderated by Subhaya. He is the Executive Vice President with Kotak Life. Subhaya has been a part of Kotak Group in various capacities for more than over 2 decades. And prior to Kotak Life Insurance, he was part of the retail loan team at Kotak Mahindra Bank. Having started his career in Kotak Mahindra Prime Limited, handling car and inventory loans before being transferred to Kotak Bank as part of the business loans and later home loans verticals. Subhaya is known for being a knowledge leader in managing employee benefit programs. He has more than 2.5 decades of work experience, largely with Kotak Group. And my name is Anuradha, and I'm from CII. I look after and I am a part of the financial sector team with CII, and I have over 8 years experience with CII in the same sector. With this, I would want to hand over the discussion to Subhaya, who is going to be the moderator for the session today. Subhaya, over to you. We have got over 200 participants right now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anuradha. Thank you for this brief introduction of the panelists and me. It gives me great pleasure to be the moderator for the second Metamorphosis 2020 Transforming Tomorrow by Kotak Life in association with CII. The subject today is personally very exciting because Sudhakar, Mayur and me, we very passionately believe in it, and it's an important part of our work program. And insight in managing liabilities and assets for defined benefit plans, I think Anuradha has explained it beautifully. So I would not like to dwell too much on it. The subject is very technical, It requires some degree of focus, and we seek your participation through participating in the polls and questions that we'll have. So basically, today's discussion is going to be on understanding the nuances of defined benefit programs, understanding the importance of coupling between assets and liabilities. Liability funding must be understood as something very different to asset funding programs, which normally we are all used to. Liability funding is where we match the present value of the liability to the current value of assets. It's a very important part of this program. Present value, as you know, is nothing but the discounted cash flows. When the cash flows are matched based on the obligation due to prior service as well as the current service, and the cash flows over a period of time and the discounting of this. Crucially, liability funding means you have to understand liability behaviors. The liability behaviors is what drives your investment strategies, and what is the impact of duration and interest rates on liability behaviors is a crucial part of this discussion today. Once we have an understanding of liability side, and obviously then we have to look at the asset side, and that's where Sudhakar will come in, talking about the asset side and how we manage duration and what is asset liability matching and how does it work, possible asset allocation strategies, and and after the thing on assets, we will have Mayur probably explain to us a bit on Ind AS 19 under the new reporting standards. How does it help smoothen things? This is something which is crucial. And of course, during this discussion, we will have polls and questions. So participation, as I said, is crucial. And I would like to hand over to Mayur to take forward the discussion on the liability side of the program. Yeah. Thanks, Mayur.
Thank you, Subhaya. Thank you for this kind introduction. We are going to split the discussion between liabilities and assets. I will speak for the next 25 minutes on liabilities. Before that, let me just get the technology right and share my screen. So when we speak of liabilities, we assume that we are using a telescope. In the same way that a telescope looks at a large object in distant space, we look at a defined benefit funds liability as a large obligation in distant time. And we find the here and now. As my co-panelist mentioned, a liability is just the present value. And hence it is the here and now of a large obligation in present value terms. What determines the size of the object you see in a telescope depends on the lens resolution. Similarly, the value of the liability depends also on the methodology and the net interest rate. Both of these are synonymous with the lens resolution. So hence, an actuarial valuation is like a telescope, which is condensing the liability which is due after many years into a value today. However, the value keeps changing between years, and that is because of one aspect called as the net interest rate. Interest rates keep changing, which are not in our hands. So our program today is looking at how interest rates affect liabilities, and then how interest rates will affect assets. And if you're looking at balancing your views and balancing the risk of a defined benefit fund, then how you should manage assets and liabilities together. After this simile of using the telescope, I'll go to a little story. It is set in old Baghdad. There's a fakir living on the outskirts of the city, and one day he sees a dark shadow entering the city. He asks the shadow, "Who are you? What do you want?" The shadow says, "I am Mahamari. I want to go into Baghdad and kill 500 people due to Mahamari." She can't stop her, she goes in, but after a couple of months, when she comes, 5,000 people have been killed. The fakir waits there, stops the shadow, asks Mahamari, "You told me you're going to kill 500, how come 5,000 are dead?" She said, "I killed 500, but the remaining died out of fear." So there is a fear always of interest rates changing, and Hence, we need to be a little bit better. Now, cut this story to the modern times, and the fakir goes back to the Badshah's Darbar. In the Badshah's Darbar, he said, Mahamari has told me she's going to come back, but we don't know when. So Badshah says, let's do one thing. We don't know when she will come back, but we can certainly do something. We will use immunity boosters, we will consult our Unani medicos, and we will also start a vaccine project so that when she is back, we are not afraid and we have the right skills in order to protect our health. And as a result, the next time Mahamari comes, there is not so much damage. So when interest rates change, there will be damage. When Mahamari comes, there will be damage, but you can control the damage in the same way that the Badshah acted on the fakir's advice and took steps. So how do you control it is the discussion point for today. I will speak for the next 20 minutes or so. If you look at the way evaluation is done, it appears like a picture on the left side of the screen, which is there are many factors which affect a defined benefit obligation. It could be the size, it could be census, assumption set, value of the benefits, changes in formula, and so on. But if you're looking at asset liability management, you have to cut the clutter and come to the right side picture, which is only about interest rates. So the focus should hence be only on interest rates if you're to do an asset liability management. So with that, I'll take a poll question, which is coming here. And this is a dipstick for the audience. The question is, when would a DB fund's liability rise? Everything is constant. There are 4 options. If interest rates rise, interest rates fall, interest rates fluctuate but settle at the same level, or interest rates don't change and are stationary. I think if we get 80% of the population answering, we can stop and show the results. You will have to click submit on your screens, please. I think we can put the poll results up, please. So we have had an overwhelming answer in when interest rates fall, and that is right. So we have an audience which is an enlightened audience, and we hence go to the next question, which is a relatively simple example. These are the first steps to understand how a liability works. Let's say 100 rupees is due in 2 years. Its present value is 87 today. Effectively, it means if you invest 87 today, it will grow at 7% compounded over 2 years and become 100. And similarly, if you invest 50 rupees today, it will grow at 7% and become 100 over 10 years. So you'll see that the present value is much lower when the period is longer. That is, if the object in the telescope is very far away, you will see a much smaller image here and now. When interest rates change, they are like the risk of a pandemic. When interest rates come down in this example, the 87 goes up to 89 and the 50 goes to 56. You will see that the changes are substantially higher, not just in absolute terms, but also in percentage terms when the period is longer. And hence, when you are looking at a defined benefit liability, which pays an uncertain sum at an uncertain and long time, then small changes in interest rates can substantially increase the liability or reduce the liability. If interest rates come down, the liability increases, while if interest rates go up, the liability will reduce. Here's something which shows how the liability has moved. For a reduction of 1%, the liability has moved by close to 2% and close to 10% respectively based on the number of years to go. There is a certain understanding which is very clear here that for 2 years the liability changed 2% if there was a 1% fall, and for 10 years the liability changed 10% if there was a 1% fall again. Let's take another view where interest rates do not fall but rise. As a result, the liability comes down, and the results are here. For a 1% increase in interest rates, the liability falls by approximately 2% and 9% respectively. So what we're seeing is there is a high degree of volatility associated with a very long duration as compared to the volatility associated with a short duration. This in technical terms is change in present value is negative of the original amount into years to go into changes in interest rate. I'll come to this formula a little bit in more simplistic terms in this particular slide. It's like a message in the bottom. There is a calculus formula which is appearing at the bottom of the screen, but it is intuitive. The left-hand side is the percentage change in liability, DALI upon LI, just simply the percentage change in liability. And the right-hand side has a minus sign and two factors, changes in interest rates and duration. So if there is a reduction in liability, it means that there is a change in interest rates on the positive side. Interest rates have increased, while if there is a decrease in liability, interest rates have reduced. As a result, we come to one result. If interest rates reduce by 1%, liability increases by D%. Very simple. If interest rates reduce by 1% and the duration is 10 years, liability will increase by nearly 10% overnight for no fault. Let's see how it bears out in real life. How do we use this simple principle in understanding how liabilities will move from published financial statements? So we have one company, Eicher Motors, publicly available information. It has a duration of 20 years, means only 2% of the people are expected to leave, and hence its duration is 20 years. In the annual financial statements, there is a sensitivity disclosed, and that sensitivity is 4 crores for 1% fall in the discount rate. And 4 divided by 26, 25.65 is about 16%. So hence in both the yellow columns, you will see if duration is X number of years, the percentage increase in liability for 1% fall in interest rates is going to be very close to that number in percentage terms. There are a few more examples of other companies. You will see that the withdrawal rate for the second company is higher, and hence the duration is lower. If more people are going to leave the company and not reach the end of the employment, the duration of the liability is going to be far, far lower. And hence, when the duration is 8 years, for a 1% change in the discount rate, the liability will increase by very close to the same amount, which is 8 years, and then it is 9%. So we're coming to a situation where the liability changes are directly dependent on the duration. Come to the same result as from the previous 100 rupee example. If interest rates reduce 1%, liability increases D%. And what is the thumb rule? That withdrawal or attrition is inversely related to duration. So if 50% of the employees are going to leave in a year, then there is virtually no risk for the organization arising from changes in interest rates, because the duration is only going to be 1.5 years. But if only 2% of people are going to leave, then as seen in the first company and the last company, the duration is going to be fairly high. And that also depends on what is the average age of the employee cohort. If the employee cohort is fairly close to retirement, say 45 and up average age, then the duration is going to be lower as compared to a very young employee cohort. So the highest risk arising from interest rate changes hence happens to such companies which have young employees who are going to serve for long periods of time because the underlying duration of that profile is extremely high. We have the next poll question coming, and I'll give some insights into this. There are two types of funds, gratuity funds and pension fund. Gratuity fund pays a lump sum on retirement, while a pension fund is far longer because it pays money unto the death of the annuitant. So when interest rates, which PB fund's liability would rise the most due to change in interest rate? The clue is if the liability has to rise, the interest rate has to fall, or whether it is a gratuity fund or a pension fund depends on the length of the time or the distance between here and where you're going to pay, like the telescope, whether the star is far into the galaxy or close to Earth. We'll wait for another 30 seconds, please. May I please request the demonstration of the poll results? Okay, so substantially we have got right answers wherein people have voted for option number C, which is a pension fund. So we are on the right page that when the liability is due after a long period of time and interest rates fall, then that liability will change the most. That is in the case of a pension fund when interest rates fall. I'll move to the next part of the presentation. Because this presentation is not just about liability, but asset liability management, we can imagine assets and liabilities as two elevators adjoining and in motion. The counterweight to an elevator determines how the elevator moves. So you will see that if the elevator is on the lowest level, the counterweight is at the highest level, and vice versa. In a sense, the movement of the elevator can be juxtaposed to the movement in interest rates and the liability, where interest rate movement becomes the counterweight and liability becomes the elevator. However, the speed at which the liability moves depends upon the duration. So if your liability has moved because of the movement in the counterweight, which is changes in interest rates, the elevator has, let's say, gone up, what do you have to do for asset movements? Can they mirror what the liability has survived or experienced? The formula basically remains the same. If you have invested in assets which are of a similar duration and the plan was fully funded, for a small change in interest rates, the liability and assets will move up together. So there will be no significant loss to the fund. An important aspect here is that a fund is a mirror of a company. It is not a trust which is not consolidated. A fund's assets actually roll up into a company's assets. So if there are losses on assets in the fund, it is a direct loss on assets as if the company suffered an investment loss. Hence, for trustees and finance people, it is important to understand that a fund should not be given any stepmotherly treatment, because the way the fund's investments work is exactly rolled up into the financial statements of the company, and they are no different than you investing those monies directly into any investment avenue. In summary, we need both the liabilities and the assets to move together. And that relative change of the value of liabilities and assets is driven by D, or duration. And hence, if both have to move up together or down, the duration of the liabilities should be very close to the duration of assets. You would have achieved a matching wherein there will be no surprises either on the downside or the upside. A famous quote here, what this great person is alluding to is that your understanding of duration is as much important as compounding. Because it is like a telescope. A large object in a distant space is seen small depending on the dimensions of the lens and the technology. So those dimensions of the lens and the technology is actually determined by the changes in interest rates and the duration. And if someone who understands it, earns it, and doesn't, pays it. With that, I hand over my session to the moderator and see you later in a later session.
Thank you, thank you for your wonderful insights. I think we did discuss a lot on the duration and the interest rates and the importance of that. We look forward to the next part where Sudhakar will talk on the asset side, and he will explain about duration management in the asset side and how it matches as we look for asset liability matching. We also will have two polls with Sudhakar, two questions which makes it participative. Thank you people for participants for participating in the first two polls. So it does give us a lot of confidence as we conduct this program. Also going forward, post the polls, we will also have a Q&A for people. So anybody has questions, please feel free to ask us questions, and we will consolidate and maybe we'll come back post Sudhakar's presentation. Over to Sudhakar on the asset side, please.
Thank you, Subhaya. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Subhaya, for moderating, and Anuradha for introducing me. Hello, friends. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar. Over the next 20 minutes or so, after a very well explained presentation on the liability side, I will try and take you through what we need to do on the asset side of a defined benefit plan. Okay. So the asset side cannot start without what markets look like. And what I have tried to do here is, on the left hand side, you see a 10-year GSEC yield chart over the last 15 years. What we observe here is early 2005, we had interest rates of around 6.5. We had the heating up of the economy in early 2008, which took the 10-year GSEC to around 9.5. Then we saw the global financial crisis taking the yields down to close to 5. Then in recent history, I'm sure most of you all remember the taper tantrums in 2013, where yields went up from 7 to 9% again. Then gradually, based on inflation control, it came down. In 2018, when crude oil went up from 45 to 90, we saw yields again go up from around 625 to 8, which was roughly a 200 basis points hike. And then over the last 2 years, which includes the latest pandemic effect, which had on the growth, we have had a 200 basis points fall. I think the message in that chart is that interest rates are a function of many variables, including inflation, fiscal deficit, growth projections, global scenarios, so on and so forth. But the message is that they are volatile, right? And if you look at the Nifty index chart on the right hand side, here again I have shown 15 years. We start with around 1500 as the index, and then you see the multiple drawdowns across the period in 2009, 2012, And the latest one, which most of us through recency effect will not forget, is when we saw the Nifty close to 7,500 and it now is back to 11,300. It's not very unusual to desire in this kind of a volatile market on both the counts, debt and equity, to have a desire to time the market. It would have been so great if I would have sold everything in January, for example, in the equity portfolio, bought everything back on the day the market was 7,500, and then sitting today with some handsome 80% gains. But I think that desire to time the market is a fallacy. Markets go through extreme optimism and extreme pessimism and phases of consolidations and no direction, if you like it that way. But I think the job is to manage the greed and the fear, which is a part of any markets. It's well explained. I had read this in a book long time back, and I thought it's very interesting for this slide. It's a conversation between an expert investor and a fresher, where the fresher asks the old timer, how do you make money in the markets? And the old timer says, it's pretty simple. You just buy low and sell high. It really sounds very simple when you say that. In response, how do I learn to do that? And the expert says, it takes a lifetime. So what it means is, the reading from this slide is that markets are volatile. It's our job to manage the greed and fear, the pessimism and optimism, and not try to time the markets. So that's broadly the message out of this slide. Okay, you guys had a nice understanding of interest rates as well as duration. So here's the poll question number 3, where we have a bond fund with a duration of 5 years, and interest rate increases from 6% to 7%. What would be the annual return? The options are there: -1, +1, 11, or 7. So remember the correlation between interest rate and the value, which Mayur explained. And if you've got that, it will be a very easy answer. I think we'll give some 30 seconds more to publish. Okay, can I request the results, please? Well. I think when the thing changed from liability to assets, there is a little bit of a confusion here. Okay, I'll have to go through to explain this, because I think majority have not answered this correctly. It's a 5-year bond. Interest rates have gone up from 6 to 7. When interest rates go up, there is an expectation of a capital loss. And that capital loss is, like Mayur explained, modified duration into change in interest rates, which is 5 into 1%, which is 5%. Your carry is 6% because your interest rates were at 6%. So 6 minus 5, your returns will be positive 1%. So I think it is very important, guys, like Mayur mentioned, to understand this aspect of your liability and asset portfolio, if you were to have both the lifts, which Mayur explained, to go in the same direction. Anyway, we'll move on.
I'll make a quick point, Sudhakar.
Yeah, please.
Most people think that there will just be a loss of 5%. But what we tend to ignore is that there is a coupon of 6% which will always be received. So it doesn't mean that just 1% rise in interest rates means the world will end, because coupons will also be received. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Mayur. Okay. So what I have tried to do here is, for benefit of all of us, is I've used illustratively Kotak Life's two funds which are available for our gratuity and pension customers, which we call the Group Bond and the Group Balance Fund. Again, I have used a 15-year, we've normalized it as on 1st of January 2005 to make the NAV 10 for both of them. And then I've shown how the returns have panned out over the last 15 years. And the result is clear in front of you. The bond fund, which has an allocation between government securities and corporate bonds, the two sub-asset classes which it invests in, based on the spreads available for between the two of them, has given a compounded annual growth rate of 9.7% over a 15-year period. And the balance fund, which has an average equity between 50 to 55, has given a CAGR of 10.8. But when you optically look at the screen, you can see that the bond fund's returns are, but for a couple of shocks which we had in during taper tantrums and in January 2009, are more or less a steady line. But the equity one has its own drawdowns. But for taking that risk, you do get the risk premium benefit. Here, because it is only 50% equity, you are getting a risk premium of roughly 110 basis points in this example. But over a longer period of time, roughly 300 to 350 basis points of risk premium over bonds is possible if it were 100% equity. I need to highlight here that I have used example of a 50-55 balance fund, but there are 100% equity funds which are also available in the insurance industry for you to deploy your superannuation, pension and gratuity money. I'll move on. This is a slightly busy chart, but kind of re-emphasizes what we have just gone through with Mayur, as well as what I have just gone through now. We have taken roughly the last 4 years data, and for each of the quarter end, we have looked at 1 year bond fund returns. Again, for illustrative purposes, I have used Kotak Life's bond fund. Then the 10-year GSEC as on that particular date. What has been the yearly change of the GSEC, 10-year GSEC? YTM of the bond fund and the modified duration. And then what is the expected capital gain or loss? And now based on the 2 sessions, you're clear that how should it move in which direction. But I think to understand the correlation, I've taken the actual bond fund example, and I've highlighted 2 time periods for you to understand the correlation. In December 16, 10-year GSEC over a 1-year period was down by 120 basis points. A capital gain expectation of roughly 16%. The bond fund has returned 15%. June 18, which was during the oil shock which we had, 10-year GSEC was up by almost 140 basis points. Capital loss expectation of roughly 3%, and you have the bond fund returning close to 0. In addition to the correlation between duration, movement of interest rates and the return expectations, one of the things which you will observe in this chart is that though the NAV chart was looking reasonably steady, the annual returns at the end of each quarter do fluctuate based on interest rates, and you do see high double digits to low single digit returns over various periods of time, which is also highlighting the volatility which is there in bonds as well. Okay, I'll move on. Hello? Yeah. So now that we've seen the volatility of markets as well as the correlation between interest rates and duration, the objective is to find out what should be the asset allocation for a defined benefit plan. And I think to explain this, what I have done is I've taken on the left-hand side a simple chart for an individual's asset allocation plan. If you go to any certified financial planner, the first question before he decides the asset allocation is, he would ask you your risk appetite. And the risk appetite is defined based on multiple inputs, like what are your goals? For example, children's education, children's marriage, your retirement, vacation, so on and so forth. How many dependents do you have in the family? What is the level of income in the family? The saving potential in the family, as well as for each of the goals, what is the investment horizon? So unless all this, we cannot decide an asset allocation plan. And the other thing which we need to observe is that each family's chart will look different based on the multiple variables which are here. If we move to the defined benefit plan, and I think Mayur gave you 3 examples of 3 companies which are in the listed space, you saw that their attributes were different for each one of them. So the expectation on asset allocation for a defined benefit plan is to immunize the portfolio and focus on liability driven investments. So the investments are dependent on what is the liability. And to put it in simple words, what we have to do is replicate the liability behavior on the asset side to make sure that we get optimum results. Before I move to liability driven investments, this is just a chart which tells us, which has been covered by Mayur as well, what factors contributes to liability. In addition to the discount rate, which is the largest contributor, there are multiple assumptions like attrition, which Mayur put in his slide, salary increases, headcounts, so on and so forth. So it's a culmination of interest rates plus the various assumptions which are used in the model by an actuary to arrive at your liability figure. Okay, this is where the heart of the presentation is. So the factors which are broadly affecting the liability is interest rates and salary escalations. So on the asset side, we have to solve for interest rates and salary escalations. So the expectation on the asset side is we have to match to immunize the portfolio, meaning we have to match the durations. And to give you an example, let's take the Eicher Motor example, which Mayur spoke about. It had a liability duration of 20. So if we can design a portfolio on the asset side, which has a duration of 20, both the lifts on the asset side and the liability side will move in the same direction. Having said that, on the duration matching, there are a couple of challenges which we face, which I wanted to highlight to you. Today in the marketplace, even a 30-year GSEC, which is kind of the longest bond, there is a 40-year also available, but the 30-year is more liquid compared to 40 years. The duration it offers is close to 12 years. That means a single bond cannot take care of your liability matching. The other thing which typically we have observed corporates do is invest in traditional funds which are typically available for close to 1 year. And by now you will understand it yourself that if your liability is say 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, and if you make an investment for 3 months or 1 year, you're really not helping the cause. To solve for the salary escalations, interest rates cannot solve it. So what we need to do is look for an asset class which beats inflation. And that is where we actively recommend to all corporates to look at equity as an asset class on the asset side to take care of the salary escalation. I've used Nick Murray's quote here, and I quote, "Equity has been the greatest vehicle for growth of income, real inflation adjusted income, ever devised by man." So I think the learning on this slide is to solve for interest rates and salary escalations, you have to look for duration matching and equity based on your liability profile. So the reading is simple: replicate your liability behavior on the asset side, and as they call it, Bob will be our uncle. You know, we'll be out of the woods. Based on this learning, I have the next. Why is the sheet not moving? Just give me a second. Yeah. So we move to the poll question 4. What should be the reason a defined benefit plan should look at equity as an investment class? And the options are there: to beat inflation, to earn higher returns, to meet rising liabilities from future salaries, or for enterprise or entrepreneurship. So I think as a hint, what we solved for in the previous slide is kind of gives you the answer away here. I would urge more people to participate, please. I think after 10-15 seconds, we could take the results. Okay, can I request for the results, please? Wow. This is an absolutely great answer. All of you, most of you have got it right. C is the right answer. I think it proves another point from my point of view, that it is easier to understand equity movements than the correlation between interest rates and duration on the bond side. So, I would urge all of you all to, spend a little bit more time with yourself to understand that, to hold you in good stead, to take care of your defined benefit liabilities. This again is a busy slide, but I think I cannot leave without showing the benefits of long-term investment in equity. What we have done here is the last 25 years Sensex movement, rolling returns over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 10 year, and 15 year. And at the bottom of the slide, you see the probability of negative returns. So because it is a volatile asset class relative to debt, the probability of negative returns over shorter periods of time is definitely there, which we should all recognize. And I think Mayur in the next session will help you understand why it is not a cause of worry from an accounting point of view. But on this slide, as you move a little ahead in time periods, the probability of negative returns materially goes down and in fact is zero for 10 and 15 year period. The other thing which this chart helps you understand is when you closer to 10 to 15 years, you will observe it optically here. The returns are in the range of around 8 to 19%. So that is kind of the realized equity risk premium which you can enjoy if you stick to equity as an asset class over longer term. Since, like the Nifty index, there is no particular index which can decipher returns, I have used again for illustrative purposes our own group bond fund to look at similar returns over a 15-year. Obviously, that fund has a 15-year history, 15-year period. Again, same rolling returns of 1 year, 3 year, 5, 7, and 10 years. Here, if you see the probability of negative returns over any time period since inception of this fund has been 0, and the average returns have been in the range of 9.5 to 10%. So friends, what we have done over the last 20 minutes is understood that markets are volatile. Don't try to time it. Look at the liability profile of your individual defined benefit plans which you have in your company and decide your asset allocation based on that. Choose interest rate, choose duration matching for interest rates and equity for salary escalations, and you will help match and immunize your portfolio where both the lifts will move in the right direction, and you would have done a good thing for your organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudhakar. Thank you for your explanations and well articulation on the duration on the asset side. I think we've had a basic understanding on looking at liabilities from a longer duration with a longer view. So the present value of the liability and how the current value of assets can move together if we look at duration as a concept and understand it and apply that mind for an asset liability matching. I think with the various standards which we have, financial reporting standards, the Indian financial reporting standards which we have in place, Ind AS 19 has come in place of AS 15. We have seen there is a significant change in reporting, disclosure requirements, and there's a lot of information available to the trustees who can actually use this information to decide their asset allocation strategies and understand the liabilities better. So who better than Mayur to explain Ind AS 19 for us from a very basic perspective as how we could use it better for our management of this program. Mayur.
Thank you, Subhaya, and Sudhakar, thank you for setting the tone. While we understood immunization, nothing is complete without understanding accounting. Because accounting regulation actually drives many of the decisions. We often underestimate regulation, but regulation becomes the fulcrum for many decisions. One change that has happened over the past couple of years is that India has moved directly from AS 15, which was the old accounting, to Ind AS 19, which is a copy paste of the IAS 19 regulation. The big difference between the two, and I will also discuss in part what the US GAAP says, is that in AS 15, if there were any volatility in the returns of assets or liabilities, those were charged to the P&L. So in a bad year, if you had a negative 2% return on assets, then the entire negative hit was to the P&L. The IAS 19 and in turn the Ind AS 19 states that don't worry about negative returns or short-term volatility. It will not affect your profit and loss account, but it will sit in a separate head in the balance sheet called as other comprehensive income. Other comprehensive income is a part of reserves and surplus, so it doesn't hit your EPS or earnings for a quarter. And as we know, because of quarterly reporting, there is heavy concern on volatility in the profit and loss account. So Ind AS 19 has done a great service to weathering out the volatility, because all the volatility of asset returns as well as liability movements will now sit in other comprehensive income. It means that more decisions can be taken on merits of how to match the liability with the assets without bothering too much that there will be short-term movements which will affect your quarterly earnings. And that is a very good thing, because long-term, this is only what is going to work. The Western world moved far ahead of us. This was there for 40 years in the US and in Western Europe, wherein the entire movement of asset returns were not likely to hit the P&L of American companies because they form a corridor approach there in the US GAAP. While in Europe, the IAS 19 was so much forbearing of volatility that the entire volatility could sit in reserves and surplus. It is hence no surprise that a substantial number of pension funds participate in the Indian markets as FIIs, while our own funds do not have the appetite for equity investments, because till about 2 years back, we were under AS 15, and any adverse movements in equities were going to affect the quarterly results. Now, this is also because of higher regulation and a more proactive approach in those markets. As you know, in the US, there are regulators for each state. In the UK, as well as many other markets, there are pension regulators. In India, who is the pension regulator? Today, as it stands, it's the Commissioner of Income Tax of that assessing office which does your tax return. That is the pension regulator, because there is no other regulation which allows you forbearance or looks at what your asset side or liability is doing. So it's in a way it is good because you're away from regulation, but because of the long and dark shadow of the AS 15 accounting standard, there was not much incentive to take risk. The good news from IAS 19 is that there is forbearance to volatility. All this volatility can be taken as long as in the long term, your elevators can start moving properly. In the long term, you recognize that earnings inflation will always be more than CPI or RPI inflation. Otherwise, no one will work for companies if their salary increases are only to be in line with inflation. So when earnings inflation are going to be very high, and your big size object, which you have to discount from the telescope, is going to become higher and higher because of earnings inflation, and you're going to pay a large drawn salary related benefit, you need to invest in assets which will mirror those expectations of higher earnings inflation. And hence, world over, it is common practice to invest about 60 to 65% in growth assets, because growth assets like equities will only be a good hedge against earnings inflation. Over to you, Subhaya.
Yeah, thank you, Mayur. Thanks a lot. We also have a Q&A section, so people who want to ask questions, please do ask questions. We'll be very happy to answer. In the meantime, there were some questions while I was discussing this, which we could probably ask Mayur and Sudhakar. So first to Mayur, defined benefit plan funding is not compulsory. So do we really need to fund defined benefit plans?
Good question, because this is a very basic question. The funding is not compulsory in regulatory regimes when there is no regulator. If there were a regulator, then there would be an insistence of minimum funding, as happens in many markets. But the good news is that it is not compulsory, and you can still pay a benefit like gratuity without funding it. The driver for this decision is tax. If the entity, the company, has a tax liability and it charges expenses for gratuity to its P&L, that expense for gratuity is not allowed as a deductible expense for tax purposes unless it is contributed or paid. Hence, you don't wait for payment, but you accelerate the contribution so that you save on current taxes. As a result, the rationale for funding stems from tax regulation, wherein only if the funding happens, a tax break is available to the contributor company. So in short, if a company is loss making, there is no particular reason to contribute and set up a gratuity fund. If a company is having special tax benefit like SEZ, there is no particular reason. But the time you start earning profits and start paying taxes and you're not funding your gratuity plans or pension plans, then it is going to be cash flow negative, because not just the expense will be charged to the P&L and the profits reduced, but also you will have to pay extra taxes for that disallowance. Another very interesting aspect is that the income that is derived by the approved funds, whether it's a gratuity or a pension plan, is tax exempt. So if the company were to manage those funds itself and invest in a fixed deposit or intercorporate deposit, it will earn interest income and pay taxes on it. However, if the same amount of earning came into this special purpose vehicle called as a gratuity or a pension fund, which is approved by the Commissioner of Income Tax, that entire income is exempt. So you have a double deduction, not just from contribution, but also on regular earnings. And hence it's very compelling for profit-making entities to form a fund and contribute.
Thanks, Mayur. I think another aspect which we all have seen through with our experiences in the recent past where companies have defaulted, funding gratuity is an important aspect because it is actually part of salary and it's just a deferred salary. So it also enhances your corporate governance, especially if you're a limited listed company, to have a higher level of corporate governance, because it is a funding of the liability which is already just deferred. And we have seen in the recent past where companies have failed. There are large companies which have failed, had all unfunded gratuity. So it is important to fund a tax as one part, but if your cash flows and you don't have investment opportunities, then you look at funding the gratuity plan. And because typically liabilities tend to grow at a much faster rate. And if you start early, you tend to smoothen out the investment pattern. Yeah.
So I want to add a quick point here. There is considerable amount of research available from American companies and in American journals, which argues how the analysts look at expected rate of returns shown by the pension funds. There is a tendency amongst pension funds to invest in overseas assets and show higher expected return because the risks are higher. So they may invest in Latin American or Asian equities and show higher investment returns in their books of account through expected returns, and all the volatility is parked into this accumulated OCI. So considerable research by the analyst community in developed markets is devoted to understanding the differences in expected return between company A and company B, because that is a direct function of the risk the company A and company B is taking. So as the market matures, we will also get analysts asking more questions relating to expected returns. And especially for large companies, I think there is clearly a reason for more research and more evidence-based investment. If I were to cut my check and say, what is the biggest risk for the Indian state-owned banking sector after non-performing assets? It is defined benefit fund liabilities.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mayur. I think further to the same thing on the liability side, Mayur, with the government of India now looking to reduce gratuity payment to a year from a year itself. One is that how does it impact duration, and how are the liabilities likely to rise, or what? So will duration significantly fall with looking with the liabilities, with the government looking to ensure that gratuity liability could start from the very first year? Mayur?
Sorry, I did not get your point.
No, with the government of India looking to reduce duration now, the vesting period now to a year, how will it impact duration of our liabilities? That's the question.
Well, duration is dependent on attrition rate. Okay, so if people leaving and the tendency of people to leave early or late is not going to change because 5 years has become 1 year. To that extent, the duration will not change. However, let's say if employees were already working for 3 years and they said, okay, let me work for a couple of years more, get my gratuity and then leave, then that is going to affect because of the 1 year vesting period. And so we would normally expect a little bit reduction in duration.
Okay. Thanks, Mayur. Sudhakar, as you did mention in your presentation that traditional funds are the favored lot. So the question comes is, I think the mindset is that traditional funds offer you safety. So is really safety as important as returns, or is safety more important than returns? That's one part of it. Secondly, is that when we say returns, the way as India becomes a developed and if interest rates keeps falling, then what would be the asset allocations? Anyway, the returns are going to be bad, so I might as well look at safety.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. If you look at traditional funds are governed very differently by the regulator. So there are some minimum government security requirements and all that, which gives you an impression that they are safe. But I think most insurers would have, safe asset classes in their ULIP portfolios as well. And, I'm also looking at one of the questions which came in the chat, which will get addressed here. Like say for Kotak Life, close to 99.7% of our assets across all portfolios are in either sovereign, AAA or A1 plus assets. So the safety, liquidity and returns all go in tandem. And I think, as I explained during my presentation, to look at a 1 year traditional fund vis-a-vis, for example, a 10-year liability will actually be a major disfavor to that fund. And to put it in simple terms, let's say if interest rates were to go down by 100 basis points, which has happened over the last 1 year, the liability of that company would go up by around 10%. And the next year when they were to renew that traditional fund, because current interest rates are low, the interest rate offered on the traditional fund will be materially lower. So you are actually getting caught on both sides when you actually go through traditional funds. And I think the volatility which is there in the asset classes, which I explained in my presentation as well, you have to live through those volatilities to realize your risk premiums over a period of time. And like Mayur explained, it is a very far away liability, and you have now accounting support or forbearance to take care of that volatility. Then why not take the right decision, but worry about misunderstood safety as offered by the traditional fund? So that's my personal view.
Also on what do we see on the interest rates or going forward, Sudhakar?
Yeah. I think if you, the 15-year chart kind of showed us all, but at a very macro level, if I have to make and I don't have a crystal ball, guys, let's be very clear. that none of us have crystal balls. As evolving information comes in, interest rates would have their movement. But at a very macro level, as a country, the factors of production, the way we look at it, whether it is capital, labor, material or whatever, we have more demand than what supply can take care of in this country, because we are a developing economy. We have 35 crore people, so the demand is going to be there. On the supply side, we do not have as much as labor reforms, capital reforms, which would be required. And very broadly, resources are also limited, the way we are structured at the center as well as the state. So we all know, even financial year, the combined fiscal deficit will look at close to 11-12%. Currently, interest rates are low because the pandemic, the growth slowdown which we are seeing globally, as well as amazing support offered by central bankers across the country, across the world, as well as India. So there is no reason to believe that we will go the Japan way, if I have to hazard a guess, that interest rates will go to close to zero and remain there. I don't think we have reached that stage. We are still in a phase where we will have volatilities of ups and downs until we settle at higher per capita income, far matured markets. Unless we reach that stage, I don't think we need to worry about it. So volatility is here to stay. Even if I were to hazard a guess, a year from now or a year and a half from now, will interest rates be higher than what we are seeing today? My bias at this point of time will be higher, for a simple reason that the fiscal deficit is materially high and it is not going to be lower even if in FY22. And if growth were to be like this, the government will have to support and the Reserve Bank of India both will have to support. So, that push and pull will continue to keep interest rates in a volatile zone, is the way I look at. But Subhaya, in terms of, that's the view on the interest rates. But in terms of defined benefit funding, you can actually move away from the tyranny, if I can call that, the tyranny of interest rate movements, if you were to just take care of your matching. And I think I'm reading one of the chats here, so I'm going to address that also, is whether it is an individual, whether it is a family, whether it is a firm, a corporate, a listed, unlisted company, I think risk appetite based funding or asset allocation is what works best. It's obviously, it is not caught up as much in India as we would all like it to be, but that is the best way to run any asset allocation, whether it be an individual, be it an HUF, be it a firm, be it a company. Just look at your risk appetite and decide your asset allocation and stick to it across market cycles. I think that's the way I would put that. Yes, Subhaya.
Yeah, I think another question I would ask Sudhakar is, should trustees actually manage actively the duration or let the insurance companies manage the duration of the investments?
Well, I will put it in a little different way, Subhaya. We all believe, as I said in my first slide, the desire is to, I explained it in an equity way, that you want to buy low and sell high, and everybody has that desire. Now, trustees are also human beings. We are also human beings, so I think we also make mistakes. But I think fund managers as a class do this for a living. So 24/7 we are analyzing various things which are happening in the economy. So the probability of errors happening at our end, errors will happen. Let me be very clear. But the probability of errors happening on judgment will be lower vis-a-vis people who are not directly in the markets. And if I were to zero it down to trustees of a defined benefit plan, I think the simple mantra is, please immunize your portfolio, take care of interest rates through matching and salary escalation, like Mayur explained, are more than inflation. Take care of it through a growth asset class, and then sit tight through the volatility, and you will take care of it. And since we manage many corporates in Kotak Life itself, and I have the opportunity to meet many of them, what I have observed, and we have done an analysis internally, that funds or the trustees who keep changing their asset allocation based on the belief that they will be able to get some better returns, actually their realized experience is far, far worse than people who actually follow asset liability management and sticking to their asset allocation across market cycles. So that I think there is enough data within Kotak, and I'm sure it is available across the insurance industry or the pension industry as a whole, that if you try to time the market, most of the times you will not time it right. And even if you take the recent impact, if you look at the March 2020 fall, if you look at the retail participation, obviously the retail participation in mid cap and small cap has gone up, but the SIP flows in the mutual fund industry actually have tapered down. So people got shocked by the drawdown in the market and have behaved differently. In fact, what they should do is continue through these market cycles, but that intelligence only comes in hindsight. We all have recency effect. When a panic happens, it's human behavior actually. That's the way we are designed. Whenever there is a panic, we go into a shelter. And I think we behave that way in investments as well. I would urge people to move a little away from the screen, if I can use that terminology, and focus on their asset allocation and stick to it across market cycles. Yeah.
Subhaya, I would like to add a wee bit to this, whether a trustee should manage or an insurer should manage. Anyone who can control credit losses should manage if both are managing duration appropriately. And controlling credit losses is not investing in the bad bonds or bonds that will become junk later. And that depends on who has greater insight into the market, who's talking regularly, and who has had a good history of avoiding credit losses.
Absolutely. And I think, Mayur, there was one question on Yes Bank. Somebody had asked a question in the chat on how have we avoided Yes Bank. And I think the response to that is, like Mayur said, and it's true for Kotak Life, and I would not be shy of saying that it may be true for most life insurers in this country. Safety, it's safety, liquidity, and then returns. Safety is the first priority. If you look at the at an industry level, if I were to make that statement, if you look at the NPL levels of the banking system and the NPL level of the insurance sector, there is a big gap. And I think that itself proves that insurers by design, by nature, because they have the policyholders, see, ultimately we are a pass-through. We have to make sure that the policyholders get adequate returns for the money which they have given us. And that fiduciary responsibility makes us a little bit more safer. To address that question in particular, safety is priority. And we have a rigor. See, we do it for a living, we do it for a job. All the credits which we have on our paper are reviewed on a quarterly basis. Each of the companies we invest in, our fund manager, our research analyst, our credit analyst would meet them at least once a quarter to understand what is happening in that business. So the early warning signals will come to people who are reviewing it on a regular basis, rather than for somebody who is looking at it after an event. And I would not like to take names, but since the chat has Yes Bank as a name, it would have been so easy for us also to invest in Yes Bank because it was a AAA at one point of time. For that matter, even ILFS. ILFS was a AAA, before September 2018. So it is not rating-based investments. It is research-based investing which happens, and we spend a lot of time in it. I would still want to make a caveat that it does not mean that we will not make errors. But guys, the probability of making errors if you follow research and discipline is lower vis-a-vis a place where it is not being followed. That's the limited point I would like to address. Yeah.
I think there was another question on interest rates and assets, how they go. I think what we need to understand is when interest rates fall, the liability grows. and the bond, if you're invested in the bond fund, your yield also increases significantly. We have to look at it from a net funding basis. Your net funding basis, because your liability is over a longer duration, as we said, it's on a present value basis, and your asset is on a current value basis. The significant, as Sudhakar had shown in his presentation, that the 12% or 13% return the bond fund has given in the last 1 year does not mean that your net funding is going to be anyway less, because your liability would have grown. In Mayur's example, he had shown a 16% growth in liability. So the duration is very important. The net funding would get impacted by the duration. So similarly, when you have a long duration and the interest rates goes up, though your bond funds would underperform, but your liability contracts at a much faster rate. So your net funding actually decreases. So this is something which we really need to understand and play out. So the question comes on that is answered. Look at it from a net funding basis rather than being stuck on I want an X% return or a Y% return. There is a clear link between the liability and the thing, and the link is the duration.
Subir, there are a few questions on the, sorry, Mayur, there are a few questions on the chat. So I don't know whether we'll be able to address all of them, but if you can make a note of them and, maybe go back to these people separately also, if you can have that in place, because I can see a lot of questions, in the chat as well. Sorry, Mayur, you were saying something.
Yes, from the chat questions, we'll try to address as many as possible. There is one question on what is a good OCI and a bad OCI. So anything that is against the principle of an OCI, which is temporary fluctuation, is bad OCI. So if you had substantial credit losses and they keep sitting in your reserves and surplus and do not affect your P&L just because it is a part of a defined benefit fund, then that is a bad OCI, for example. There's another question, is in the asset allocation will gold figure? So there is no such asset allocation today, because either you can be self-managed and you follow Rule 67, which is the good old rule of state government, central government and other bonds, and with a little bit exposure to equity, or you can keep money invested with an insurance company which has an approved plan. So in the future, if the insurance company has a gold fund for group, then perhaps gold can figure there, because insurance companies have freedom. So there are two aspects, that the greatest freedom available to match in terms of duration will be more possible as things stand today with an insurance company. Because every month, I think another aspect of the disclosures that happen from an insurance company's fact sheets is that every month you know what is the duration of your bond fund.
Mayur, there are some questions on MAT and tax. Would you like to take those?
Yes. So there was one interesting question that even if the fund's income is tax exempt, the results of the fund will, through the actuarial valuation, roll into the main company and then you will pay tax on it. So I would like to correct that. If you're very careful in your tax returns and say that this is just a roll up of an exempt fund which has an exempt status under 1023, there is a subsection attached to it, then you can claim that as an exempt income.
I think interest rate views and all I have covered. There are some personal questions which I would not like to advise on in this forum.
There was another question whether a fund can withdraw all the monies from whether the company can withdraw all the monies if employees have exited. So if we go by the basic principle, these are irrevocable trusts when they are formed, and that's how the approval is given. And hence, there is no such possibility of taking the money back. The accounting standards, hence as a result, look at an asset ceiling. So in a situation where your assets become very high and your liabilities have just vanished, then the main company has to take a charge to its P&L because it cannot recognize those assets which are overfunded. So trustees have to be very careful about funding right and not just overfunding, like say 200% of liabilities, because the asset ceiling related accounting provisions will hit their P&L or OCI as a case.
Sure enough, I think we are coming towards the end of this program. There are more questions. We'll probably reach back to people who've asked this, and and could always come back to you all on your questions. It's been great with Mayur and Sudhakar, and I hope people who have witnessed this program have enjoyed it as much as we have. Over to Anuradha to in this. Over to Anuradha.
You're on mute, Anuradha.
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you so much, Abhay and Mayur and Sudhakar. I think it was like going back to the college of sorts. Everything got refreshed, and it was a very, very interesting session, both from the liability side and asset side when you're discussing the defined benefit plan. And honestly, I was so busy writing and taking down some important points that I just saw that we have almost gone ahead of time. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm sure all our participants really enjoyed, and there are major takeaways from the session. A lot of things were explained. Mayur, you are a rare professor, honestly. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, participants, for such an active participation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure. A pleasure. Thank you.